Watercolor Wizard's Hajra here. Today I'll be demoing how I painted a Carolina parakeet in watercolor for the current Extinct Animals round of the Animal Artists Collective. Thanks for parking your brushes here and let the epic painting adventures begin. I'm doing the lines for this hanging candy decoration with my quadruple zero brush. I'm going to come back and fill in certain sections with a cool green color. I mark those with a dash to know which ones I wanted to color. It's pretty easy to forget, especially when you're worn out, and trust me, that has happened before. I drew the circular outline to the candy with the same tiny brush and sections, and I found that doing a circle in short sequence keeps it from getting distorted or angular. You can also use a compass with a brush or a marker in it like I've shown in a past video, but these circles are really too small to use that technique easily, and I've actually gotten used to just freehand brushing a circle in, so it works okay for me. I did a second pass of color over the first glaze to make the green color darker, and all of this has just been wet on dry. Then I come back with a very diluted wash of the same cool green color and do that with more wet on dry to imply a light shadow near the rim of the circle. Then finally I came in with white gel pen highlights to make the candy look glossy. I actually prefer my gouache paint for more smooth and opaque whites, and also because it doesn't have a weird texture and it blends much better with other paint. But I've said this before that I'm waiting for this last white gel pen to run out because I bought a pack of 3 that seem to last forever and ever, so I'm trying to just use these up. And I'm only going to show one more of the decorative hanging circles because they involve a lot of rotation while I'm painting. Gives a person weird sort of vertigo to watch it in a video. But all of them are painted in the same way, so as long as you can see what I'm doing here, you should be good. I use the same colors in the rings as are going to be used in the bird to keep it a limited color scheme. So here I'm using a lime green and later a warm yellow for the alternating ring colors. It's actually really easy to create this ring, it's just more wet on dry, but this time with a damp blended soft edge so that it merges into a highlight. I create a darker pocket of color on both ends of every segment and then leave a softened highlight in the middle. The key to making it look authentic is to do it in the same shape all the way around so you get a consistent shape with consistent highlights. You'll probably notice that I'm using an apostrophe or comma shape on either end all the way around on the various segments. Notice that I also put a piece of vellum under my hand to keep my hand off my watercolor paper because it's just going to smear my pencil sketch or attract paint around at the most inconvenient times, and again, this has happened to me before, so I just try to prevent it. You might have noticed that I have repeated candy themes in my artwork. You can see them in my hanging ornaments painting, my magical goat painting, my second magical goat painting, and also some of my bunnies and Easter chicks. The vibrant spectral color scheme and the glossy candy elements evoke a magical holiday, nostalgic, Christmas childhood feeling for me. So I like to use these elements to cheer me up, and they often show up for rather melancholy pieces, such as this one where we have a bird that was hunted to extinction by selfish humans. Same thing for my goat paintings actually, because they were actually done as a tribute to one of my best friends, Lucky Button, who was a beloved pet who passed away more than a year ago. So again, glossy candy to me is a way to comfort myself as I deal with a sad subject while I'm painting. So it just goes to show you that you can't always guess why an artist uses certain elements. It might look like it's simple and cheery, but it actually might have a more complex motivation behind it. For the yellow parts, I started out with a lighter yellow and then switched to a chrome yellow deep when I saw that there wasn't enough contrast on the paper. The colors I used were leftover paints, some Sennelier watercolor, watercolor pencils, and some Inktense block colors. They were on 3 different palettes from past projects, but they happened to be the colors I needed for this piece, so this was a good way to use them up. The color scheme is red-orange, orange, yellow, yellow-green, green, and blue-green. So it's kind of a long, double analogous group along that side of the wheel. There are no true blues, purples, or true reds in this piece, and also no independent blacks or browns or other neutral or earth colors. The browns that you'll eventually see are mixed from the colors that I'm using. The other 3 rings are just going to pop in. Again, I did them the same way I did the first ring, so you're not missing anything. Just like I did with my dangling ornaments piece, I used a gold gel pen to create a delicate chain with a line of dots going up to the top of the page. I used a ruler to draw on the pencil line, and you don't have to do that, but I recommend it so you have a neat straight line to follow. I usually place my signature carefully so it's part of the balance and decorative effect of the piece, In this case, I thought it would be a nice touch to also make it look like it was hanging along with the ornaments. The eye was done with Chrome Yellow Deep as a base color with a dark brown mixed from all the other colors together for the pupil and also along the iris edge. I put these on wet on dry and then softened the brown with a damp brush. I left the white of the paper for the highlight in his eye and also added in little lines of brown to imply his little eyelid folds. I mixed a lighter brown using some of my orange neutralized with a bit of green to make a flesh nudish type of color because this species has light feet and a light beak. The beak was done in a combination of wet on dry and wet on wet to get some hard and some soft edges. I wanted to make sure that I got a rounded shape to give the proper volume to his beak. That's why you see highlights near the center of his beak area and the dark shadows near the edges. For his head, which was a vibrant yellow with a glorious red-orange mask area, I started with a glaze of a medium yellow from Sennelier, and then came back with Chrome Yellow Deep also from Sennelier to add dimension via temperature shift. Because the initial yellow was wet, I could charge in the chrome yellow to get soft bloomy edges. I began adding an orange and then eventually red orange in the same still damp paint. I used a stippling motion to my brush to get a fluffy short feather effect as I blended and herded the colors around. We're finally onto the bird, which is a Carolina parakeet and sadly extinct now. He's got such an alert, intelligent, and adorable face like so many other parrots. I really wanted to pay attention to how I did his eye and beak and head area because I wanted to get that intelligence and that warmth in his face, and it really is the most important part of this piece. I added a few more wrinkles in the eyelid area to keep that white ring around his eye from looking too sharp. His color shifts to a yellow-green and then a darker green as it moves down his body. So I'm on to using the same wet and wet method with the yellow, lime green, and then the cooler green to keep that same short, fluffy feather effect in his chest area and his legs. The smaller feathers on the top half of his wing are actually where I spent the most time. There were a lot of little sections here, and I used wet on dry to color in feather shapes first and then added paint with a wet blended edge over top, and also some areas where I used wet on wet using water and paint. The wing feathers are shortest near the shoulder, medium length in the middle, and then longest at the tips. And you're going to see that develop as I move down the wing area. And he's also getting gradually darker in those greens, and I'm going to use less yellow and more lime green and cool green so we can see that shift to the darker green as well. I'm still going to keep the yellow the whole way through because he had iridescent feathers in real life, and the only way I can show that is by using both the greens and the yellow so that it affects the illusion of iridescence or color shift. Sometimes it takes a while in the sketching process because for this piece, for example, I had to do 3 sketches before I was happy with the layout. Sometimes the very first layout will feel great, but not always. Here you can see that the first layout had too much empty space, and I wasn't really happy with that because it felt like the bird wasn't a focal point, and it also just didn't give you as much interest or pop with all that empty space there. So I had to redo it with the bird larger, and then I also flipped the direction that he was facing because in the initial direction his tail feathers would have hit the hanging ornament, so a lot of fixing had to go on and redrawing. But in the final version, he did look way more like the focal point because he was larger and taking up more space, and there wasn't all that distracting empty space that didn't have a good balance. The negative or empty space is just as important as a positive space in a piece, and it can have a real impact on how compelling or pleasing a final painting is. When I get to his underbelly, it's more wet and wet fluffy feather effects because it's more of the shorter, downy, non-wing or non-tail feathers. Because it's further down, I used more of my darker, cooler green. This was a challenging piece to draw and paint because I actually didn't have a single photo reference of this poor extinct bird and had to study taxidermied specimens which were shriveled and not very useful except for the color placement. Audubon did a painting of this bird, but I didn't want to do a master study of his parakeets. I wanted to do an original painting of my own, so I just studied the Carolina parakeet's characteristics and many photos of his close relatives, the Aratinga parakeets, to create my original drawing of this gorgeous bird. and it took a while because I didn't want him to look clumsy or inaccurate. For the very top part of his wing, the feathers are short enough that I can again use a wet-on-wet bloom effect and multiple layers of yellow-green to cool-green. But here I do maintain the U or C shapes of the feathers because they are larger than some of the finer down elsewhere. The Carolina parakeet, Conoropsis carolinensis, or Carolina conure, was a small green neotropical parrot native to the eastern, Midwest, and Plains states of the United States. It was the only indigenous parrot within its range, as well as one of the only 2 parrots native to the U.S. The only other native parrot is the thick-billed parrot, who is sadly on the endangered species list with only 1,700 left in the wild currently. The Carolina parakeet lived in old-growth forest along rivers and in swamps. It had the northernmost range of any known parrot, ranging from southern New England and New York all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico and as far west as Colorado. Carolina parakeets lived in noisy social flocks of 200 to 300. Then I added in some soft edge shadows underneath and around the wing. I also spruced up the yellow areas for more vibrant color boost in the wing area. Then back to more floofy wet-on-wet as I get to the bottom part of the wing. Given their wide range and huge flock size, it's all the more shocking and lamentable that humans managed to hunt a species that likely boasted a few million members to extinction. For its amazing feathers and because it was a nuisance to large-scale modern agricultural crops, and also secondarily due to deforestation, also caused by humans. It was cruelly easy to enact mass slaughter of this bird due to its tendency to group in large flocks which returned to flocking grounds where previous birds had been shot. The rest of the long wing feathers and also the tail feathers are going to be pretty fast and easy because they're longer and bigger shapes. As with the smaller feathers, I'll have a shadow side and a more lit side indicated by darker and lighter greens respectively. They're done mostly wet on wet because I want to keep the whole larger color sections smooth and not have like jagged, sharp, dry sections. He's got a teeny peak of red-orange by the shoulder of his wing, which I noticed in the taxidermy specimen, so I went back and added that in. While I was there, I also punched up a few of the smaller value contrasts in the shadow areas. I went back to polishing off the rest of the tail feathers. Incus, the last captive Carolina parakeet, died at the Cincinnati Zoo in 1918, in the same cage as Martha, the last passenger pigeon, who had died in 1914. Geez, what does that say about people? Carolina parakeets were assumed poisonous. They were known to eat toxic cocklebur seeds among their diet of various seeds and fruits, and cats apparently died from eating them. In fact, Audubon's painting of this bird shows several of them having a grand time in a cocklebur plant. The only thing that's left now is the feet. What I did for those is to use my brown mix to indicate lines that follow the contours of his feet first and then follow that up with softened shadow areas that will merge the lines into the shadows. As far as the little lines that are affecting the contours on his fingers, if you've ever drawn Spider-Man's hands, then you'll understand that the feet of this parrot are much the same process. I did the little claws with more brown and left a little highlight on each one. He's actually got a fourth finger that's not visible here because he's a zygodactyl like others in the parrot family. So that last finger would be on the back side of the ring that he's perched on, and we can't see it, but it's definitely there. Finally, I've got the tassel, and I do that with the base color of chrome yellow, and then follow up with red, orange, and brown for darker shadow areas, and white for the highlight areas. After I pop in that ring that he's perched on, it'll wrap up this piece. The other participating artists in this AEC round include founders In Liquid Color and Jennifer Charlie, as well as Sade Saves the Day, Meow Meow Kapow, Amy Howard Art, Mary Sanchez, Visual Mind, guest Sarah Newberry, and me. If you know my channel already, then thanks for being one of my watercolor wizards. And if you don't, and you found your way here as a result of the Animal Artist Collective, then welcome and hope you subscribe. I work in watercolor, gouache, and ink, and create info-dense videos and posts on YouTube, Skillshare, and Patreon. And please make sure you check out the other videos from this round of the Animal Artist Collective. The links to the other participating artist channels are below in my description box, and you can also find some more information about the AEC down there. Well, wizards, hope you enjoyed seeing me paint this vibrant watercolor Carolina parakeet. Hopefully this video and my artwork for the AEC will help raise awareness and support for wildlife so we can prevent other gorgeous species like this from being wiped out by insensitive humans. You can buy this artwork from me by contacting me via email or messaging me on Instagram or Patreon, and I'll also be putting it into my Etsy shop soon as well. I will donate 50% of my proceeds to the World Wildlife Fund or the National Wildlife Federation, two organizations that I have donated to annually for more than a decade. If you want a more affordable art print, decor, or stationery of my artworks instead, there's plenty in my updated Redbubble shop. Please like, comment, subscribe, and check out my website links and Patreon page to support my art and art channel below. Thanks for parking your brushes here, and wishing you all epic watercolor adventures.